Hello everybody, I'm back with another Marvel Legends Spider-Man themed action figure review, and I'm getting towards the end now. I'm wrapping up this recent wave of Spider-Man related figures, and today I'm going to be focused on another surprising character, which is the Last Stand Spider-Man variant. Again, this isn't a character or a version of the character that I'm actually familiar with. I haven't read Last Stand, so I can't really have much in the way of expectation for it, so I will just be reviewing the figure on its own merits. So let's dive straight into this one and kick off by looking at the packaging. Now, we've seen this packaging before on some of the other releases in this wave, so we saw it on Hallows Eve, and I think we saw it on the Spider-Shot figure as well, so you know what to expect by this point if you're picking those other figures up. I quite like this design. I think the spider web is pretty effective, and I like the colorization, I like the choice of colours that we see here between the purples, the reds, the blues, and the yellows. I think it's quite striking, and we have this billboard effect image taken directly from the source material, I assume, which looks quite attractive. So, yeah, of course, you can hang this on your wall, and it's going to be quite striking, quite visually appealing. If we flip it and look at the reverse of the packaging, I think this is where it really comes into its own. I actually think the reverse is actually better than the front. We have a nice large image here of the figure in action. We see that greyed out or blued out image from the front of the packaging recycled behind him, which looks really good. And then we actually have a little bit of bio explaining what this version of the character is about. And I have to say, it actually sounds quite intriguing. This is what I might pick up in the future. So, looking at the figure itself then, I have to say it's a little bit underwhelming. Whilst I do quite like the overall design, this idea that he's in his leathers as opposed to his skin-tight PVC costume, it doesn't really translate that well to the action figure, I have to say. Now, if we take a look at this head sculpt, I'm not sure if this is a new sculpt. I feel like it actually might be. We actually have a seam down the middle of the top of the head there, which is interesting, and the eyes are actually sculpted in rather than just painted in, as we saw with some of the other Spider-Man figures in this wave. So this looks like a different head sculpt to the Spider-Shot and the Scarlet Spider that we've seen in this wave. But other than that, there's not really much to write home about, I'm afraid. There's really very little going on in the way of paint apps. Yes, the eyes have been painted in, and the white and the black have been painted around there, and that's largely it, because the rest is just basic red plastic. And I'm afraid that this extends also to the body as well. Whilst I'm not sure whether we've seen this before, this actual particular mold, that certainly the chest piece looks to be new. I don't know whether they've had this on any other Marvel Legends figure. The spider logo, for example, is sculpted in, which is great, both front and back, so I think this is a new piece. I'm not sure about the arms. We may have seen this before. Certainly the legs, the jeans, we've seen before, as well as the feet. But other than that, there's really not a lot going on here. There's no shading, there's no washes, there's nothing to draw out any detail. It's a little bit disappointing. And I've got to be honest, I really hate the feet on this guy, because his feet are really uncooperative when it comes to posing him, and he does not want to stand freely. I've managed it here, but honestly, this is a real battle, because he just wants to fall over all the time, and it's one of those unfortunate joints that just doesn't really want to work with you. Speaking of joints, let's take a look at the articulation. Well, he's got 2 points of articulation in the head, one in the top of the neck and one in the base of the neck, so he can spin his head all the way around and wobble it from side to side. He can nod it down a little bit, and he can push it back a little bit as well. He's got ball joints in the shoulders, no butterfly joints sadly. There is a complementary bicep swivel and a double joint at the elbow, but you know, it's one of those that I'm actually kind of struggling to get the full maximum use out of this, because it just doesn't really want to give more than 45 degrees. There is the pin swivel at the wrist, of course, as we know and love. There's also a swivel. Is it actually a ball joint at the waist? I think it actually might be. It will allow him to spin from side to side and lean left and right, which is good. And he can sort of bend forwards and backwards a little bit. There's ball joints in the hips, so the legs will kick out to the side. There's the upper thigh swivel there. The legs will kick forwards. They'll go to a dead stop when they're straight. And then there is another double joint at the knee. This time we can get the lower leg all the way back, which is good. And then we have the standard ankle pivot, which will rock from side to side, but it won't really arch forwards and backwards at all. Alright then, he hasn't impressed me so far when it comes to paint apps or even the articulation particularly, but maybe we'll get some fantastic accessories. Except all we get is this extra pair of closed fists, which is disappointing. And that's it. That's all there is to this figure. So this makes it a pretty short review. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a really low score. I'm going to give it a 1 star. And I don't usually hand out 1 stars, and I feel a little bit bad about this because it's not a terrible figure per se, but it does feel very phoned in. This feels very low effort on Hasbro's part. I'm not quite sure why. So why am I giving it 1 star? Okay, well, as I touched on, I'm very disappointed by the lack of paint apps that we're seeing here. This is quite lazy. I mean, it's something we see quite often in Marvel Legends, but usually you get something nice around the head sculpt, if nothing else. And we haven't even got that here. So this feels very plastic-like to begin with, which, you know, isn't a great start. But you can usually overlook that if there's fantastic articulation. The articulation here, it isn't a bad scheme, but we don't have a butterfly joint as we've seen on some of the other Spider-Man figures in this wave, which is a shame. He's got a nice waist joint there, fair enough, and he does have 2 points of articulation in the head and the neck, which is, you know, should be good, but actually you can't get an awful lot out of it because of that collar there, and it just feels a little bit underwhelming. And then we have just a tremendous lack of accessories. I figure if you're going to do something with a character like this, a variant, where you're not putting much effort in elsewhere, then at least give him an alternate head, an unmasked head, or something cool, some flipping effects or something. All we get is one pair of additional hands, when all the other Spider-Man figures in this wave actually have flipping hands. It may be that that's not appropriate for this version of the character, I don't know, but surely you could give him something else here. This feels very, very bare bones, and for that reason, you know, for me, he's kind of on a par with Spider-Shot, but at least Spider-Shot had that butterfly wing joint, and it actually had some nice accessories for the most part. This just really scales all of that back, and it's just very disappointing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.